Hi, welcome to the channel. This is Beyond Authentic, where our focus is on all things weird and witchy. My name's Lisa.
And my name's Neil.
And today is another fabulous podcast. This is Witchy Wednesday with... I am absolutely sitting on my hands and pursing my lips to not sing along to the theme tune, as I think I've done in the last 6 episodes. If you are watching this, it means it's gone up on time. Everything is good, because this month has been a little bit hectic, hasn't it? So just to fill you all in, if you are watching this on the video version, hello, welcome to YouTube. Please do the YouTubey things, hit the subscribe button, ding the bell, all of that good stuff. If you are listening to this on one of the many plethora of platforms, I like that, the plethora of platforms that our playlist plays on, our podcast plays on, yes. A plethora of platforms our podcast plays on, then thank you, welcome, and hopefully you'll hit all the like and hearts and follows and whatever it is on that particular platform, because they're all different, because that's useful. But also do make sure you pop over to the YouTube channel Beyond Authentic. The I in Authentic is actually the number 1. Come over there and come and check out what you are missing from the visuals. So then, Neil, let's do our regular check-in. How have you been this last month? What have you been up to? Anything weird and magical and fabulous?
Well, I've been working on a project which ties in very nicely to the theme of this, so I'm excited to talk about that.
Oh, we haven't even talked about, I haven't even mentioned the theme, have I? God, no. I'm such a bad podcaster. Yes, so today's theme is divination. So then I guess, first of all, Neil, the first question that people may be wondering is what the hell we mean by divination, because some people equate it to the root of the word divine, and it's looking for that divine inspiration, that divine knowledge, that knowledge of divinity, of, you know, what God has in store for us, all of that. Other people will look at it as things like reading your horoscopes in the Daily Mail. You know, oh, you are a Sagittarius today, you're going to eat a pasty and a pint of lager. You know, that's probably a little bit too exact for the Daily Mail, but you know what I mean? It's that sort of, you know, that's all they understand about divination. But actually, divination's got a massive wide open, there's a wide open field that relates to that. So I guess my first question to you then is, Neil, what are the things that come to mind when I say to you, what is divination?
Well, I suppose both of us are very heavily into the tarot. That's kind of what I've always done. But, you know, you've got other methods like runes, pendulum, astrological charts. There's lots of different versions of scrying, you know, with fire or crystal balls or black mirrors. But yeah, basically it's that. You know, that's it, I guess. I mean, what would you add to that? I suppose Ouija boards, maybe. And
yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting one, because I was actually, when I was preparing for this a couple of days back, I was like, should I show my Ouija board? Because I do own one. I don't ever use this particular one. I don't ever use a Ouija board as a general rule, although it's something I am looking into for this season. But I don't know whether I would class that as divination. It's a really interesting thing, isn't it? Because I would say, for me, a Ouija board is a bit more about spirit communication. So it's about looking for actual communication with people that have passed over or are around in the spirit realm.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, it kind of is standard divination. They will use it in the same way, especially when I'll show you later on my new pendulum cloth. It's got elements of the Ouija board. So it's kind of like, I think there's a lot of blurring going on between definitions.
Yeah, I think it's because we were kind of mentioning it before we started this, was when you talk about divination, do you think that the knowledge is coming from, you know, an outside force, whether that's, you know, the general energy of the cosmos or entities or something? But there's a good bit in Condensed Chaos by Phil Hine where he puts things into these magical models, and he says you tend to, in magic, practice in one of these models. So, for instance, there's the spirit model, which is about working with gods and entities and ghosts. And then there's an energy model, which is about using energy, like all the different energies. I don't know, I can't remember what they are, but you know, like prana and chi and vril and stuff like that. And then there's the psychological model, which is just basically kind of Jungian stuff, kind of drawing things from your subconsciousness. And then he talks about a kind of fairly modern model, which is cybernetic, which is more about the science and spirituality crossover. So for me, when it comes to divination and using divination tools, I tend to work in the psychological model, where for me, it's all about kind of drawing from my subconsciousness and maybe the power within myself, rather than tapping into, you know, because you talk about the, what is it called when you're talking about doing the tarot? Is it like the Akashan?
So yeah, the Akashic records. Yeah. Before
Yeah.
I talk about that, you've literally just sparked something in my head, because this is one of the reasons I love doing this podcast together. Because you and I, when we have a conversation, my little light bulbs go ping, 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 ping. I guess there's another fundamental question that I need to ask before we even talk about what divination is. It's, what do we use divination for? Do we use it to look at our own lives and where our own lives are? In which case, I think, yeah, in that sort of situation, if I'm looking for the reasons, like to use shadow work and things like that, the reasons I do certain things, then it's a very psychological element. If I'm looking for something, if I'm looking as divination, as in, you know, fortune telling, literally saying what is to come, foreshadowing and kind of getting connections to you know, events as they are about to play out, then for me that is something very different. That is something that, you know, I don't think, for me, I wouldn't be able to use the tarot in a psychological method to get what's going to happen to me in 3 weeks time type vibes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It wouldn't,
Okay.
I wouldn't be able to do that. But if I was looking for, and I've used it for shadow work, where I've looked at the different cards and gone through things like that, and that is very much more on the psychological element, because that's looking at how I connect to that particular card and what that particular card inspires, sparks, or brings up in me, or what immediately wants to come up and I immediately shut down, because then I go, oh, that was an interesting thing, maybe let's just go and dig a little bit under that hole, what's going on that dark corner of my psyche, which is what shadow work is obviously all about. So when I use tarot on the Sunday session tarot readings, it is very much using the Akashic records kind of in that spiritual way, of that mode, if you like, that spiritual model of witchcraft, because it is connecting with the energies that I work with, which is they're basically all rooted from an egregore servitor type creation, but all of them have sprung from that one energy thought form creation, and they now embody the different kind of spiritual energies, especially now I have the fifth dragon coming on stream for when I'm undergoing surgery. And so for that is very much a spiritual element, where I use that energy as guides, and something somehow connects me to knowledge that I don't previously have, that is saying, you know, I don't know, in this case, I don't know, name a card. In this case, the Hierophant isn't referring to a spiritual leader of a nation, or, you know, it's not talking about a sort of spiritual journey. It's talking about that control, that sort of papal power, rather than it being this. And there's something that basically, in my head, it's almost like having an old-fashioned Rolodex in my head, or like an old-fashioned, like a dictionary, where it's like, this is what the card means. Of this card's 57 definitions of what this card could possibly mean, which one is it that the person is going to connect to, and which one is it that pertains to their life? And I've got no idea when I start my sessions what that's going to be. But also for me, the deck that I use will alter the set of meanings as well, which is why when I'm trying to put together some tarot learning materials at the moment, some resources, it's almost impossible, because it's like,
Mm.
right, this is what the Hierophant means if it's this way up. This is what it means if it's reversed. This is what it means if it's at this point in a spread. But this is what it means if you're using this deck. This is what it means for me if you're using that deck. This is what it means if it's, you know, come up next to this card. This is how it changes. And it's looking at all of that nuance, where when you buy a tarot deck and you get the, I mean, for instance, I've got the Rider-Waite deck here in front of me. You know, you get the little white book, as they're called, the universal little white book, which gives you, in fact, let's find the Hierophant. I'll tell you how many words there are for the Hierophant. Hang on a second. This is, I don't know whether you can see there. Look, that whole paragraph there,
Yeah.
which has 27 words in its keywords. That's really interesting. So I'll read you this. It says, I need my glasses on because I'm an old witch these days. I'm about to enter my cronehood. So it says, marriage, alliance, captivity, servitude by another account, mercy and goodness, inspiration, the man to whom the querent has recourse. Now, you see, none of that makes any sense to me, because that's not how I've learned the Hierophant's meaning. But it also reversed apparently means society, good understanding, concord, overkindness, and weakness. Now, none of that relates to what I know the Hierophant to be, through the various decks that I've got, which is one of the reasons why I've picked up the Rider-Waite Smith deck, so that I can look into it in a bit more ways. But yeah, so for me, like the knowledge, especially when I can be reading the cards and then I just know something, and that's almost when it kind of veers into almost mediumship or spiritualism, or sort of those sort of psychic clairsentience type things, where it's like, actually the person these cards are talking about is an absolute, you know, abuser, is a wife beater, is a horrendous specimen of a person, and then I can get given, literally, I will smell something, or I will see something in my mind's eye that will be instantly, it's like an image or a scent kind of comes to me from out of nowhere that pertains to what I'm talking about in that moment, and instantly it gives me a visceral reaction, which is telling, you know, it's normally for a red flag, but sometimes it'll be like, yes, oh my God, this person is absolutely the one you need to go in, you know, try and date, because if they've shown interest in you and you've got a little bit of interest in them, trust me, this is the one. Like, go chase this person, because this is the one. Like, don't let this one go. Not as in like, I've got you, I'm going to put you in my basement for the next 6 years and you put the lotion on. Not like that. You know what I mean? But so yeah, sometimes I get these flashes of stuff, and I've got no idea where that comes from, apart from this connection to the Akashic Records. So just to double back, the Akashic Records, as I understand it, I cannot remember, partly because of the fibre and partly because my brain these days is just mashed. But I cannot remember which culture this originally comes from. I want to say it's a Sanskrit word, which probably means it isn't at all. But anyway, it's almost like everything you say, oh yeah, that comes from the Sanskrit. Yes. No idea.
Let's make it legit.
Exactly. But it's basically a concept where there is effectively a giant library that holds books of each of our lives, and that book of our life is everything we have ever done, will ever do, have ever done, could ever do, is all stored, and it's already written. Like, from the minute we are conceived, before we are conceived, that book is already written. And what some of us are able to do, according to people who believe in the Akashic Record theory, is that some of us are able to tap into that library and borrow that book for a second. So we're able to just say, let me just have a look at the next page. You can't look at the end of the book, but you can just kind of peek over the page to see what's happening next month. And so for a lot of people, the Akashic Records, it is that library, that bank of information that we all share. And my belief is that if that is out there somewhere in the ether, that there is a way of connecting to it that I use via the tarot cards, and sometimes through scrying and other methods that we're going to talk about today, through different divination methods, I guess. And I'm able to access parts of that information. And other people that are in the mystical realms, the sort of spiritual realms, and the sort of mediumships and all of those people are able to access that as well. But how each of us access that information, can be very, very different. And that's sort of one of the things that I find really interesting about how all of this sort of field works. I think it's really, really fascinating. So yeah, so I
yeah, I
can't
mean,
remember
I
what your
tend
question was, but there you go, that's the answer.
well, no, I mean, like I was saying, I tend to go from the psychological point of view in the same way that, like, you looking at a piece of artwork and whatever mood that you're in at the time, how you react to that. And say if you're doing a spread where, you know, you've got a certain card in the future and it's making you feel shit, you know, look what's going on here, then you can kind of use your reaction to it as a way of kind of trying to get control of the situation that you're reading about. So that for me is kind of how I do it. But you are right about the kind of decks having totally different personalities. I found that I've always kept with the Mythic Tarot, which I got when I was 16, and you know, I got that mainly because I'm really into kind of like Greek mythology, and you know, the images are really beautiful on them. These are quite old now, but I've tried to, you know, go for other tarot decks like for a while because I'm really into comics. I got the Dave McKean Vertigo Tarot, and I thought, well, these are all cards that are featuring characters that I'm really familiar with. This is going to be a great deck. And I was just like, I just could not click with it. There was something really too serious about it, and I just couldn't click with it. And I've always gone back to the Mythic deck, just because, you know, I know what's going on in these because each suit is about a different Greek legend and story, and you know, the major is, you know, a god in itself, and it's just a really easy one that I kind of always go to. But it's a very it can be very, for me, it can be sometimes, if I overuse it, then it tends to get really fucking harsh with me and kind of almost like, will you fuck off for a bit? You know, it kind of starts pulling all the bad cards after a while. You know, I'm always just, it all becomes swords, and it's not necessarily that I think this is what's going to actually happen to me. It's almost like it's way of telling me, yeah, we pack it in
Enough
for a
now.
bit.
Yeah, like I need a rest now, for God's sake. I've got some show and tell of a prime example of what you're saying there. So way back when, donkey's years, like probably 25 years ago, I'd had another tarot deck that I don't remember which one it was. It was a fairly basic one that had started me off in sort of learning when I was about 18. And then I went into this alternative shop and I saw the most, or what I thought would be the most stunningly beautiful, gorgeous deck, and an amazing deck to work with. And it's called Crow's Magic. And it was released in, I think it is, hang on, it's got a 1998. So it is very of the 90s, right? If Blade and Razor Blade Smile and, oh my God, what was that comic series that you just said? You just said about comics, and you just said that the comics company,
Vertigo.
which wasn't Vertigo, yes. So if Vertigo, because it's definitely not a DC or a Marvel deck, it'll be one of the indie house decks. So it's like if Spawn, Blade, and the entire Vertigo back catalogue could create a tarot deck, this is what it would be. And it is very 90s. I mean, the back of it is just, you know, two metallic crows.
It looks
and
like
then,
some title sequence to like The Crow 7 or something.
yeah. So if you imagine what a 90s video game of The Crow with 90s VR effects would look like, that is this deck. So like, this is the Fall. It's a metallic hawk with some random square blocks. and you know, let me find. So you know how much of a connection I have to the Empress. She's there behind me, right?
Yeah.
So this is the Rider-Waite Empress, standard kind of imagery. So of course in this deck, what have we got? It looks like a poster that Bruce Willis in Moonlighting would have on his wall. Or it looks like something from a like 90s slightly alternative pop band, like a Duran Duran B-side video. That's what it looks like. It is a very, very strange deck. It's like a fucked up 90s fever dream. It's like you absolutely got stuck into the Lawnmower Man, watched it 25 times, then dropped a load of acid, and then basically put it on in the background whilst you were tripping out, and then then designed a tarot deck. So this was the second and my main tarot deck that I was like, I'm really getting into this like fortune telling malarkey. I'm getting really into this sort of divination art. This deck is going to be so cool because I'm so alternative and cutting edge, and I like my vampires. And so of course I'm definitely going to have so much fun with this deck. Like the Page of Cups, absolutely, it's a friggin' dinosaur in space long before Doctor Who did it. Oh my god, this is going to be so cool. Yeah, no, it literally sat in a drawer. My original deck sat in a drawer probably for a decade, because I was just like, no, I'm not at that point. So I went out and got from the works, and this came with a wonderful book. I got it's now actually quite famous, this deck. I got the Jonathan D, not John D, Queen Victoria's like spiritual advisor, and no, Jonathan D. This lovely deck where, I mean, the artwork goes from, so we literally go from that amazing style there to, well, you saw the Page of Swords then, didn't you? So this is the Page of Swords on this deck. I mean, you know, let's not bother with the background. Let's just randomly trace a figure, not give any idea of any gender or age of the figure, put them in something that looks vaguely like it could be medieval, but could also just be an oversized 90s blouson, and that would do. And is that a sword? Is it a stick? Apparently it's a sword because it says it's swords. But yeah, so the artwork, literally, I went from weird and wonderful and outrageous to the most basic of basics.
Bloody
like
hell.
Pip deck. Like,
yeah, I don't
Three
like
of
the pip deck
Pentacles.
stuff.
No,
Yeah,
I can't stand pip decks.
it's hardcore. I mean, there's the mythic one was great for learning, because if you're kind of familiar with all the, you know, the legends, and each suit is one of the legends. I was going to show you the Empress, because I think this is this is absolutely beautiful. This one, that's you can't really tell on my webcam, but yeah, that's like
it looks like, is she with child?
Yeah, it's kind of hinted there. It's
Yeah, possibly
Demeter, who's kind of like the Earth mother. So that kind of goes. It's absolutely beautiful, that one. I mean,
and it's got the standard imagery of the wheat field, for abundance and all of that. That's really interesting, actually.
I mean, you've got kind of some interesting ones that, I mean, the art is very charming anyway. Like Death is obviously going to be Hades, you know, which is you know, and the Devil is obviously just Pan, you know. Yeah, Judgment. It's just they're just really, yeah, they're just really nice, bright images, beautiful kind of, you know, Pandora's box, and so yeah, they're just really nice, bright cards. But no others have stuck with me, and I've just ended up making my own systems, which I'll get into at some point.
My current deck that I am preferring at the moment to do my my Sunday session readings with is actually the Thelema Tarot, because again, a bit like your mythic one, it's beautiful. So this doesn't work with a particular pantheon. It's a beautiful set of pictures that have their own take on some of the cards. So again, just to show you like a random one, I've just pulled two of the majors. Okay, so we've got Temperance, which again, this is quite a standard looking Temperance. It's the angelic figure pouring water from one vessel to another, talking about patience and all of that loveliness. And then you've got Judgment, which normally would be the angelic figure with the souls rising from their graves, you know, being called up to be judged. And yet this one has this ethereal white kind of fairy angelic kind of element, but just here, no, just here, this side, you've got these orbs. Now, the way that I interpret this is that looking at it through the eye of like the standard meaning of a judgment card, this is obviously that same angelic figure, that same calling for judgment from answering the universe rather than answering the Christian God. But then these are the souls, rather than it being like the figures, the ghostly figures coming from a grave. It's like, it's almost like they're already in their orb form, and they are being taken back to depart their knowledge, or to you know, convey their knowledge of what they've learned this time round. So the judgment here is a lot less, it's a lot less harsh, but also, again, using a standard imagery of a bugle or a trumpet. Here we've got a horn of plenty. So again, you've got all of these different meanings that come in. You know, random. So when we're talking with tarot, we always say, or that I always equate cups with love and positive emotions. Swords are always the negative challenge cards, challenge suit. But in this one, we've got the 8 of Cups, and that is not a happy, loving figure on that card. It's looking almost heartbroken. It's looking, you know, lonely. There's a certain desolence about it. And I just love this deck because it speaks of, even in the happiest times, be careful, because that dark cloud is always coming, and in the darkest times there is always that silver lining. So it's always talking about that light and dark. So this is the ultimate, for me, classing myself as a liminal witch these days. This is like my ultimate deck for now, because it absolutely is just like, yeah, there is so much darkness in the really positive cards and so much light in the really dark cards that actually it's like no card is entirely white or entirely black. Both of the, like all of the cards in this deck have so many undercurrents and under meanings that for me, I just absolutely love it right now. And this is one of the reasons why I love tarot over and above oracle systems, because for me, I've obviously learnt tarot using, you know, a really basic deck. Then I moved on to a Rider-Waite or a Rider-Waite clone, and then all the various other versions of those sort of decks over the years. But once I've got those 78 cards basic meanings in my head for my level of understanding, what I then do with this deck, this gives me a really interesting and nuanced way of understanding each of those cards. And then if I'm doing readings, you know, for the public, then I've got this. If I'm doing readings that are slightly more, you know, I just want to know about romance and lovely, happy things, then I might pull a different deck. If I'm, you know, if when I do my Sunday sessions, it's very much, this is tarot without the fluffy bits. This is like, I'm going to tell it as it is, light and dark, in that liminal space. Whereas I've also got a deck called the Macabre Tarot, which is a really different like spooky ooky alternative deck. Lots of, you know, skulls and characters with their eyes being gouged out, lots of really interesting imagery like that. But that to me is a very much more shadow working deck. It's still tarot, it's just, and it uses the very defined tarot system. It's just, you know, taking a slightly different look at it. And it's almost like the nuances between, you know, if you say the color blue, well, the shade of blue that you think of when I say blue could be very different to the shade that I think of when I say blue, but they're both classed as blue. They're both the same base color. So it's like you and I will both have a similar understanding of what the tarot is, but your understanding of it is different to mine. So that's why I love the tarot. And then when you get onto the oracle systems, the thing that I like about them is that each deck has its very own system, its own number of cards, and its own way of working. And the thing that I hate about them is that each deck has its own number of cards, its own system, and its own way of working. Because it basically means if you get to know, say if you end up liking 4 oracle decks, you can work them in different ways for different meanings to do different spreads. Me, as a fairly forgetful, you know, old fucked up brained sort of individual these days, I can't remember all those different ways of working with a different card deck. You know what I mean? So I really struggle sometimes with things like the oracle. But yeah, so I mean, like, have you ever looked at things like oracle or any of those other things?
I've not ever looked at the oracle decks, but I've always kind of favored the bits of card as divination. I mean, in the IoT, you know, they said, well, you've got to come up with your own system, and it's got to be absolutely unique to you, and it's almost like no one else could use it. Make it that unique. And I instantly went to paper, and what I did, and this is a very chaos thing to do, I guess, some chaos shite for you, but I was really into
that wasn't meant like that. That wasn't. So for those of you listening and for those of you watching, a little delve behind the curtain. I was talking to Neil just as we were doing this, and I said, have you got, because I've got lots of stuff here, have you got any chaos shite? I meant as in I've got lots of shite all over my desk, like I've got lovely decks, but it's still a pile of shite, stuff to show and tell everywhere.
Oh no, I get it.
Clutter.
Totally get it.
And so now Neil's just throwing that back at me, which is quite funny. But yeah, go on.
So at the time I was really into the video game Silent Hill, and I'd played it through like multiple times, and I said, well, what if I wrote out, I mean, this shows the time of my life I was having, and the amount of time I had on my hands, and how magically obsessed I was I wrote down every single line of dialogue from the game when I played it through, and put them onto a series of cards and used them almost like tarot cards, because every line of dialogue I knew what that was related to. And because Silent Hill is full of very cryptic things that people come out with, they were great at kind of interpreting, and you know, it was a really good system. And I think, I don't know, over time I kind of went, right, I'm done with that system, because, you know, chaos shite, that's what you do, you just kind of go like, done with that. But I mean, recently this project that I've been doing, again, card stuff, is that my favorite ever video game is Fallout New Vegas. And what they did is they put out a set of playing cards, which are basically, every card is one of the characters with a quote from them on. And I did this, I've just finished it, where I wrote out kind of the meanings for, you know, the tarot cards, and then put what character that equated to, you know, the suits. And right, okay, so Mr. House is 10 of Pentacles and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, well, that kind of lines up. Is this an intentional thing? Is this almost like they've based it on where there would be in the tarot? But it kind of got to the point where it was like, no, a lot of these are just coincidences. So how am I going to work with this? So I thought, well, it's going to have to be its own system in itself. Just don't think about the tarot, just use it as its own system. And it's just absolutely amazing, because I know the Fallout lore inside out. So when I draw a card with that character on, I instantly know that whole background, in the same way that when I pull out one of the Mythic deck cards, I know all that story and that character. But because I'm such a big fan of Fallout, I'm really excited to use it, and I want to keep using it, which I think is a really good thing when it comes to divination systems. You know, you've got to keep practicing it. Yeah, so, and you know, like over the last few days when I've been kind of playing with it, I just keep, you know, I just keep playing with it and testing myself, and sending them to people, like readings I've done for other people, and people are like, fucking hell, this is good, just to kind of give me a bit of feedback about it. And yeah, I'm really excited, because the cards are they're just fantastic. Just because, I mean, if you weren't a fan of Fallout or knew anything about Fallout, they're just these really striking images. And the quotes themselves, if you just went on the quotes, you would think. So what was the
quote on that card?
So this one is, we don't have to dream that we're important. And that's Mr. House, who is kind of, he's a Howard Hughes type figure. So easily you would equate him to being an ambitious, genius, kind of neurotic, goal orientated, wants the world to be a better place, you know, invention. And it's just instantly, because I know about that character, then that just comes with that card instantly. I've decided not to do reverse readings, because I don't know how I would really do that. And then things like, say, there's a character called the King, who is a guy who's obsessed with Elvis. who lives his life according to Elvis's way. It's almost like he's worshipping Elvis as a god, and he has like a community of people who also follow the ways of Elvis. So the king is a very in his quote is, where every man is free to follow his own path, do his own thing, where every man is a king in his own right. And it's like, if no one knew about who these characters were, then you'd be like, oh, if that got pulled out in a spread. So they're just lovely cards, like, to use. And some are just some of the quotes, obviously, when it comes to like the bad guys in there, they get a bit, oh, what that could be about. You know, you've kind of got, you know, people saying pile body upon body, and, you know. But for this, because it is just, you know, it is playing cards, so it is just the suits. So I don't have any major arcana. I mean, I do kind of want to geekily also choose one of these each as a major, because some are major playing characters in the game, like Mr. House is, you know, a big character. So I'd like to assign some people as major arcana cards as well, and maybe just read with those too. And so yeah, it's pretty exciting for me, this.
I love it.
But yeah, I
think
I'm just gonna, you know, kind of work with this quite a bit now, and because it's two of my geeky interests is the occult and Fallout. So
no,
yeah.
I absolutely love that. I think for me, for the reading that you did for me using that system, it was, well, I don't even know how to process it yet. I really don't know how to process it yet. It's one of those that it's thoroughly interesting, and I hope it's quite accurate.
Yeah, I've done readings for other people, and it seems to be, because it's kind of like the world of Fallout is about pre-war, post-war. So you've got all the goodness of the pre-war, and then how terrible it is post-war. So a lot of it is I found that this deck is very good for almost reading things where there's been a very kind of pre and post to it. You know, so it's could, you know, doing readings about people who have gone through something quite severe, and kind of pre and post how things are either side. And
I think it's fascinating that you've done that you've created your own system for that. Fascinating system.
Good fun.
If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ding your bell so that YouTube should notify you each and every time we upload a video. But if you'd like to support us and the channel just a little bit more, you can always go across to buymeacoffee.com/BeyondAuthentic, where you can in fact buy us a coffee. That's also where full details of our brand new channel memberships are, including our members only perks, which include videos a day early and exclusive content just for members. Thanks so much to all of you who are choosing to support us.
What other forms of divination have you used that aren't card and paper based? Have you used things like runes or crystals or scrying? You mentioned scrying. Have you used scrying? Or
when I was a teenager, I kind of got into doing runes a bit. I made my own runes and worked with them for a while, but I just found them, I didn't really click with them very well. Like, I found them very, very involved and serious, and very kind of very detailed, and I didn't kind of get the knack for reading them. And to be honest, it didn't really appeal to me to do the runes. And I've probably tried some other stuff. Like, I got into doing like astrological charts when I was younger for fun, but that's me and astrology are just like, yeah, for fun, you know.
How is that for fun?
It's the mid-90s. There isn't the internet. You know, you've only got 5 channels.
Spending 3 days drawing up charts of where stars are, and
I used to be into doing people's birth charts and stuff like that. But I got really into doing automatic writing when I was a teenager.
Wow.
And I used to do that a lot. You know, I was really, really into it. And the more that I did it, the better I got with it. And I think I became a bit too obsessed with doing it, and there was kind of things that would come out that freaked me out a bit, because it'd be things that would bang on, like it'd say things that were going to happen, and then they did, and it was getting a bit, where is this coming from, sort of thing. Because for me, I've always just thought, well, this is just, I'm tapping into subconsciousness, and why would I know that that's going to happen? And
because it's the
yeah.
Akashic records. You're subconsciously connecting, you see. It all comes back to or whatever your version of that theory is. Now, you see, that's fascinating. You see, I've tried automatic writing. Okay, so Neil, for anybody out there listening or watching this that doesn't know what we mean by automatic writing, how would you define, or how did you automatic write?
Oh God, I can't remember. I mean, it was all about getting yourself in a certain state of mind, and to just, kind of putting yourself in a kind of trance, and just feeling where your hand is compelled to go with a pen, and just keep going. And then you just build it up over time, and then you start making more and more shapes. It's almost kind of like a pen and paper version of the Ouija board, almost. And just kind of making certain shapes, and then afterwards looking at it and seeing what words you can see in there. But it got to the point where I'd be like literally writing out whole things, like just, without even really thinking about it. So yeah, it's one of those things where the more you do it, the more you practice it, the better you get with it.
Okay, so does that link into, have you ever been sat, off topic, but have you ever been sat in a cinema where you've been watching a film on the day of release, and you've been trying to write a review, and you're like, you've got your paper, you got your pad, you got your pen, and you're just like, I'm just writing, I can't work out where I'm writing, and then you open up in like daylight, and you're like, the lines are going everywhere. Have you ever done that? Because I've done that trying to write a review for magazines, and you're like, trying to write.
I keep a dream journal, and so like in the middle of the night I'll wake up and I'll be like in the dark, and then the next morning I'll wake up and go, I can't remember any of my dreams, and I'll open it up and it's like I've left a drunk message to myself, because it's just, and then all the words are overlapped, and it does look like, oh, am I crying?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've used things like dowsing rods in the past. I'm going to be doing a video on them actually, because I've got a way of making them, and we're going to put them up on the shop when the shop reopens, once I'm done with this cancer malarkey. So when we're done with it this time, once I'm kind of fully healed again and kind of waiting for the return, then I'm going to be making some. We're going to be reopening the shop and rejigging the shop side of things. But I'm also going to do a video on how you can make your own, because I used to use dowsing rods quite. But yeah, so dowsing rods are something I've used in the past. As I say, I do have a Ouija board. I've used Ouija boards in the past for spiritual connection in things like, I hate to use the word seance, but it's the only word really that fits. But in spirit communication, there we go, rather than seance, because we weren't bringing the spirits back; they were already there. We were just giving them a tool to talk through. And I've had some weird and wonderful experiences with those over the years. So much so that I refused to use one or even have Ouija imagery in my house for the longest time.
I have tried the Ouija board, but it just felt a bit too novel to me.
It feels, and there is always this thing where it almost feels like, again, performative witchcraft. It feels like you're kind of like, especially if you're in a group of other people, where you're like, let's get the Ouija board out, because you're a witchy person and you'll be able to get my grandma to talk to me. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. You don't control the board kind of controls you, and you don't talk about, like, you can ask for certain people to come and give you a message, but it's not like a mobile phone. You're going through your contacts list. I'll just talk to this one. It's like you've got your mobile phone and you can guarantee the person you don't want to speak to is the one that's going to be ringing you. That's how the Ouija board works. It's like, it's not necessarily going to be Uncle Bob. It will be Sam from school 25 years ago that you have barely spoke to, but last time you did, you were bullying them. But you know what I mean? It'll be that sort of person that comes through. But one of the systems that I used to use a lot, and then completely kind of, I don't even know why I stopped, but I used to use dowsing crystals and things a lot, and I do have an old so pendulums. Dowsing. So dowsing was the word that we used for anything that was in your hand, basically. So whether it was a dowsing rod, a Y shape, like the metal rods that the L-shaped ones, the things that look a bit like straws, metal straws, and the ones that do that are dowsing rods. Or you get a dowsing stick where it's like a Y-shaped stick, and you hold either end, and then it points down or up if you're, you know, going towards water or oil or gold or something. You know, I never found gold or oil or water. But a dowsing crystal or a pendulum is also another system that I used to use, and this is one that's fairly newish in my weird and wonderful magical collection. This is just a little bit of amethyst. I nearly said it's a little bit of quartz, but it is quartz. It's just amethyst. It is a form of quartz, but yes. So this is one that I mean, it's fine. It's nothing fancy. I used to use an old nut, like a metal nut and bolt nut.
Oh, okay. I was like,
on a piece of,
just like
yeah,
a
an old, no,
hazelnut
on a piece
or
of old,
something.
no. This is it. On an old piece of like old Hessian rope that was a really thick bit of rope that I used like a bit from, tied, and that used to just hang on that, and that I had the most wonderful success with. But when I used to do like ghost hunts and things like that, I'm part of paranormal groups, like investigation groups and things like that, you know, you pull out, you go, right, we're going to do some pendulum work. Everybody expects you to have this like jewel encrusted thing, and it's me with this like rusty old, slightly oily, manky old wing nut from somewhere on a bit of string, kind of going, oh yes, look, this is definitely like, yeah. So I eventually had to give that up, even though it was one of the best things I ever used. But I used to like just basically go yes and no. So you do it one way for yes and another like round for no or something. But then you can get into, with pendulums, you can get into all sorts of like nuances. And then these days, I now use this, and this came from one of the witchy boxes. I can't remember whether it was Cures and Curses or Witch Casket. I think it might have been Cures and Curses, but it's one that you'll find quite regularly. And it's just a, hang on, let me do that. So it's just a kind of pendulum cloth. So it's got days of the week on it. It's got moon symbols on it. It's got the astrology symbols on it. It's got numbers and letters, and also a yes, no, maybe. Yes, no, maybe, unknown. So it's got 2 yeses, 2 nos, 2 maybes, and 2 unknowns. And so a version of this I used to write on just like A4 paper. And depending on what we were doing, I wouldn't normally have the letters around it. This is that weird thing I said to you just before we started filming. This is almost pendulum work airing into the side of Ouija, which I quite like. I quite like it. It's taking it from, so for me, a pendulum is kind of tapping into your subconscious, maybe via the Akashic records, maybe via some other form, to give you an answer that you don't necessarily know you know. So either it's from your deep subconscious where you're like, where is my wedding ring? I can't find it. Is it in this room? And you go, oh no, it's not in this room. Is it in this room? And it goes, oh, it is in this room. Right, okay. Is it above a shelf? And you can kind of do those things with it. But for me, and also if you notice, this is just on an old bit of necklace chain. These days, if I was to go and do this, you know, as a YouTubey witchy type person, I'd have to have a crystal on it, on the end, and then maybe another couple of crystals that are in chakra stones, and that you hold in a particular way. Bollocks to that. You just wrap it round. As long as I've got it wrapped round my hand like so, and as long as that falls over, I don't do it like this generally, because then people go, oh yes, but you're manipulating with your fingers. I like to do it, come on, wrap round. So it's literally, it's like wrapped round my index finger, and then it just sits there. And so it's a lot harder for people to say, well, you're making it spin like so. Possibly you are with a pendulum. Possibly it is, micro movements from yourself, from the subconscious, that is making it go either way. But again, what is causing those micro movements? A lot of people just go, oh, you're doing it yourself. But if you're not doing it consciously, you're doing it subconsciously. And at some level, whether it's quantum mechanics, Akashic records, at some level, the subconscious is tapping into something that we don't know. Therefore, fine. If it's my hand that's actually making the pendulum swing, great. I'm not doing it consciously. Therefore, the answer is coming from somewhere else. So what I always used to do is do a yes, no, maybe, unknown on the 4 cardinal points. And then it's not like in, again, showing my age, it's not like in Buffy the Vampire Slayer where you're like over a map going, where is the demon house? Oh, there it is, number 57 Sycamore Drive. Not that. If you live at 57 Sycamore Drive, call me. We can come for an exorcism, very cheap rates. But my advice would always be write down, if you're going to do a divination session, even if it is just like, are my keys in the kitchen? Oh, it says they are. Right, great. You grab your car keys, you've got to go to work. Just on your way out the door, open your notes on your phone, use the pendulum. It said keys were in the kitchen. Turns out it was right. Keep records like that, add it into your book of shadows or your working book or whatever it is, because it will help build your experience level, and it will also help build your trust. And also, from my experience, not all pendulums, not all dowsing crystals tell the truth all the time. A bit like your tarot deck where it goes, you know what, I've had enough now. Is all the swords, giving you an example, that is all the swords going, and that's my way of going, no, shutting down now, thanks. Again with the crystals, again with your dowsing, again with your pendulums, you can find that sometimes you'll use them and then one pendulum might be super suited for, I don't know, relationship type work or questions about love and friendship and families, and you'll be like, wow, if I ever need to ask, like, does Sebastian in 4C, does he fancy me? Is he going to ask me to prom? And you go, oh, he is, great. Does, you know, Mrs. Williams at number 47 secretly think I am Satan because I wear dark makeup? Oh, no answer. Right, let me get this. Oh, now I've got this pendulum. And, you know, now I've got this one. You go, oh, and that goes, oh, yes, she does. You go, because different pendulums and different, that is similar to tarot decks and similar to other things. They can have different personalities.
It's kind of going back to the like budget episode where there's all these kind of classical divination tools, you know, crystal ball and black mirrors and tarot cards and such. And you don't need those tools, even though they're quite handy and they look nice. You know, it's like you said, you can make a pendulum out of anything. I have a friend who couldn't afford any tarot cards, and he just got out blank piece of paper, and he used to read with the blank piece of paper, and he used to just visualize what was on the paper, and then after a while he would draw out what he thought there were, things like that. Because in general, I think that if the universe is trying to tell you something, then it's going to tell you something however it wants. I mean, one of my big things is whenever I go out walking on my own and I'm in a bit of a slump, I'll always find a playing card on the floor, and and it's like I've amassed so many playing cards. You know, it's kind of, I see them as the kind of things from the universe. So I kind of collected ones, and even things like Pokemon cards I found on the floor, you know, and Yu-Gi-Oh cards. And to me, it's like, why they're going along with these playing cards that, you know, if you can interpret these easily to go with tarot, then what do these mean then? Just because it's kind of like a modern bit of paper. What is that telling me? I mean,
well, when we're all children, we learn how to see images. It's like, as children, all of us have done divination. We've all done it. We've all interpreted signs. Do you know what I'm talking about? Lying on your back on a summer's day, looking at the clouds and going, that looks like a frog. That looks like a whatever. No, they're rain clouds. But you are interpreting shapes and you are interpreting something. And it's a small jump to go from that random shape, that random cloud looks a little bit like a frog, to, okay, what does a frog mean to me? What does that symbolize to me? So you don't actually need any of these tools. On any clear day, you can go outside and look up and see that. And that is exactly what people did hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years ago when they looked at the stars and went, well, I guess that could possibly be a ram. Or maybe that would be a plow or whatever. And it's all of these things. Somebody somewhere had to sit down and write for the very first time, why is Orion shaped like that? What does that mean? What is the interpretation of Orion? Blah, blah, blah. It's just a random collection of stars. If you were on any other planet in our solar system, let alone any other planet in the entire universe, they would look very different. So it's literally, there is nothing to say, like, you've created your own system. I think that is amazing. As I say, I've tried doing that. I probably put too much stupid bloody things into it. And I probably need to go back to basics a little bit more and work out, you know, what this all means for me in a way that I can remember. But we've all been there looking at clouds. We've all been there looking at something and going, oh, look at that tree. That looks a little bit like a whatever. And you go, and then the next person goes, I can't see it. And you go, look at that cloud. Can you see the frog? Oh, now it looks like that frog's now a boat. And you go, oh, what is it? I guess so. Sort of a banana shaped boat maybe. And you're like, no, it's a Viking longship. Look. What do those things mean to you? Like, use that as your form of divination. You don't need tons and tons of money and things and all this stuff. But if you want to go down certain systems, like tarot has a system, runes have a system, pendulum work has a particular yes, no, maybe kind of process that you can then develop your own system for. And that's the important thing, is finding a system of divination that works for you, that also, when you're writing down in your divination journal, that is kind of testable. But there are all of these different systems that, as long as you are able to start seeing results, it doesn't matter what it is. You know, people in other cultures use entrails, people throw the bones, people throw dice, people use I Ching. There are all these different methods of divination that all come back to the same thing, giving you some symbols that you then, as the magical practitioner, interpret as signs of the future, or as signs of a subconscious layer of somebody that needs to unpick. That's what it's about.
This is like a really great episode for showing the contrast between your more traditional witchcraft versus my more modern witchcraft. You know, there's a lot of things that meet up in the middle, especially to do with tarot and kind of our attitudes about things, really. But it's interesting how, you know, you're exploring all the kind of classical ones and kind of picking them apart. And I learn a lot from you, because I don't tend to kind of go down those ways, whereas you kind of learn about some other weird ways to think about things.
It opens up completely new ways of thinking, having conversations with you about stuff. It really, really does. And it inspires me in sort of ways. I'm still trying to, like, I'm still blown away about Batman as Justice. I am still blown away about that, because it makes so much sense. And I don't know how I'm going to interpret that at some point and use it. But at some point, I can feel kind of like a really personalized system coming into place, using either pop cultural icons or using some sort of Jungian archetypal kind of messagery and imagery that means something to me. Almost like giving myself that IoT practice. See, I've got it right this time. It is IoT, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes, thank God for that. I think if you'd gone no, I'd have gone, oh shit. But that idea of like coming up with your own system that is unique to you, there's something about that I'm thinking, oh, that sounds really fascinating as a concept. Like, not just trying to do a mojo bag, which is maybe something that culturally doesn't connect with me, because I think you're right. I am quite a traditional witch at heart. And the way that I look at these things is coming from a slightly more chaotic point of view. I kind of think of myself as almost a traditional witch with sort of a traditional modern witch, if you like with an interest in this sort of, what's this side, isn't it? So it's like I've got an interest over here, just not quite in your picture of the chaos world, but kind of like there's elements of it seeping through into my world and into my realm and my magical ways of thinking, because I do look at quantum mechanics and these things as making things possible. I do kind of like all these ideas of, you know, using science and using brand new techniques and technologies. Like, but I never in 100 years would have thought about using my phone as a scrying mirror. And that again sums it up. For you, it's an obvious go-to. You've got a scrying mirror in your hand, in your pocket. For me, because that is such a modern emblem, my phone is about communication and is something that isn't about internal communication for me, whereas you, from your background of chaos, it's far more you use everything around you for its purpose. Whereas for me, I'm very much like, you know, I would reuse a physical old thing for something rather than looking at a new piece of technology and go, how can I interpret that in a new way?
Yeah, 'cause I think in general magic is in everything, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and it can be manipulated. So I do like to look at old systems and see what, you know, I like to learn about stuff and then go like, okay, how can I flip it? How can I make it unique and exciting for me and not feel like it's homework and I should feel compelled to learn these things, you know? I mean, I think the next thing I'll do is doing a coming up with a tarot system just using MP3s, I think, where I assign a different song to each card, and then you put it on shuffle when you want to read in, you know, and because that to me, because I'm like music is like the greatest passion in my life, and I could have a
Music
field
is your
day.
first love.
I could have like an absolute field day coming up with that because again, I'm making it unique to me. You know, if you would ask anyone, oh, what song would you assign the death card? Everyone's going to come up with something different. Because then it's like you could come up with something really obvious. Obviously, you could come up with something that means death to you, a song, or it could be a theme in a film that's soundtracking a death.
But no, I think that would be a really interesting system as well, and a really interesting way of interpreting things. For me, it's very similar to when we were talking about the Are We Heretical Witches episode, and we were talking about magical shortcuts. It's like if I am using the tarot system, that system has been around for hundreds of years at this point. And so like the energies, the universal energies already know how to interpret it. All I'm doing is kind of looking at it from a new perspective for me and an individualistic perspective. I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm not coming up with a whole new system that I have to breathe that magic into. And it's kind of like that thing where, again, I know I refer a lot to Terry Pratchett. I am going to go through at some point all of the Terry Pratchett books, find all of the quotes that the witches say and write them down, and then work out, almost like you did with the game, and then work out a system or something using the bits of wisdom that are in there, because for me it's really important. But the way Terry Pratchett writes about the old gods and how, you know, everything used to have a god, and as time's gone on, we've forgotten all of those old gods, a bit like Greek and Roman pantheons where there was a god for just about everything, and certainly in the Celtic world as well. It's like that magical energy is still around. That magical energy is still there. It's just been diminished to such an extent that you can't tap into it anymore. And so for me, it's like I pick up a tarot deck. This comes with all of that energy pre-built into it, if you like. So the minute I start opening it up and working with this card system, it's connecting to something that hundreds of thousands of other witches are connecting with across the world and time and space. And so it's for me that web of weirds, that interconnectivity of all magical practitioners, it's kind of borrowing from the ancestral energy whilst also giving my own energy to what would eventually be future generations, and you know, my energy becomes their ancestral energy, and so on and so forth. And so there's always this element of, by looking at, I guess, traditional methods, it's paying homage to those, but also it's looking at it in a way of, how can I make this work in the modern world? How can I make this work for me? It's like finding a tarot deck like the Star Spinner deck that isn't white, cisgender, heteronormative, like finding a system, finding decks that talk to me about other things and inspire me in other ways. And then looking back at, you know, pendulum work, swinging something on a piece of string has been a classical divination tool for millennia. Like before there was card printing, before there were crystals and runes, swinging something, does this mean yes, does this mean no, is like a really stupidly early form of divination. And so for me, it taps back into that archaic energy, that ancestral, that deep rooted magical connection that connects us all the way back to, you know, allegedly the people that built the pyramids, the people that built Stonehenge, the people that first looked up at the sun and went ook, ooh, you know what I mean, and had to come up with a way of what the universe meant to them. And so for me, there's kind of a real strong connection with all of that ancient energy, whilst also kind of putting it through a slightly more modern filter to find an individualistic way of working with that ancient energy, if that makes sense. Whereas I think for you, it's almost like that energy is there and it's fine, but that doesn't inspire you. It's almost like, you know, it's like you're the Blumenthal, what's his name, Hester Blumenthal of chefs. Like, I want to go back and make the most amazing roast turkey dinner. You want to go and, you know, put it in a sub-zero bath and attach, you know, various different gases and chemicals to it and turn it into like the essence of a turkey, which is now like a steam that you don't no longer eat a meal. You now like have a pipette full of steam placed under your tongue. You know what I mean? And it's like, essentially, we're both doing the same thing, creating something out of food, but you want to take it in a whole different, new, inventive way. And I'm very much like going, yes, my grandmother made it this way, but how can I make that work in an air fryer? You know what I mean? It's like, how can I, you know, how can I turn this ancient old recipe into something using a microwave? You know what I mean? And it's like, I find it fascinating when we talk, just because from these different perspectives, and hopefully the people listening and watching do as well, because obviously that's what this podcast is all about. So that is our podcast for you all today. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you have, please do me the biggest favor in the whole wide world and hit that thumbs up button. It really helps me out with YouTube's algorithm. And then while you're there, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and ding your bell so that YouTube notifies you each and every time I upload a video. I believe you can do that across all the platforms as well. So if you're listening to this, you can either follow or subscribe or like or heart or something, depending on what platform it is. Do all of that good stuff as well. Talking about social media, Neil, I've seen on your Instagram that you are hard at work on the next issue of Necronomicon.
I always like people reading reviews of the films that they've not seen, and then me convincing them to watch it, and then, you know, then maybe they'll watch it with like a it's not for me, but okay, I see what this guy's on about, and yeah, I can appreciate that about it. I wouldn't have noticed that if he hadn't mentioned it.
But go and check out the next Necronomicon issue anyway, because I've got to say, your reviews, I like the fact that you are quite informative, but it's not like an IDMB blooming you know, it's not like a whole thing from, you know, from some like scholarly piece. You're informative with putting your own kind of like, and this is why I really like it, because on this bit you can see the jawbone fall off or whatever it is. And that's what I really like. So yeah, so that's why I like it. Look at me, I'm fangirling about your zine. I'm like, yeah, go get it. I can't wait for that.
Yeah, it'll be on Etsy probably in a few days' time. So I'm going to reopen Etsy. So.
Fabulous. I'll put all the links to that just down in the description box. Make sure you check those out. I've got a load of videos coming your way very soon, hopefully. I'm also going to be filming at some point the pendulum video. So going on from what we've talked about today, I've got a whole video planned about pendulum work. So make sure if you are wanting to try pendulum stuff for your first time, make sure you go and check that out when that goes live. But yes, so Neil, what is the, so look at me playing my blue tack. Neil, what is the subject of the next, I know, right? I know.
What we're like.
It's just a little neurodivergent thing, isn't it? Is what it is.
Yeah.
So Neil, what are we going to be discussing in next month's podcast?
Death.
I like the way you point to me at that. Yes, we thought, seeing as like it's been one of those subjects that has been very, very firmly brought into focus in my personal life very recently, obviously with my cancer diagnosis and stuff, that we would discuss it and we would take a look at it in terms of what witches think about death, the afterlife, what chaos magicians might think, what we think personally, and maybe we'll even tap into that whole death life cycle. Like, where did our consciousness come from at the beginning? Did we magically pop into existence? Are we going to magically pop out of existence? Or are we part of a great big recycling unit in the sky that just takes our energy and recycles it into something else? If you want to know our thoughts on that and also some of the different magical perspectives, make sure you join us next month for that. But for now, everybody, that is this month's episode done and dusted. We will see you on the next one. And as we always say, stay you, stay safe, stay authentic, and we'll see you next time round. Bye-bye.